Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to Softball Canada's National Coaches Week webinar with Mark Smith, Melissa Vasilio, and Jenna Caira. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land in which I join from is the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq First Nation. I would also like to acknowledge all traditional land on Turtle Island in which we gather from for this great conversation during National Coaches Week. This week marks the 7th annual National Coaches Week, which runs September 18th to 26th, a week to celebrate the people that support, motivate, and inspire our athletes and the positive impact they have on our players across Canada. So to all the coaches joining us tonight, and for the ones even who are not joining us, from everyone at Softball Canada, thank you for being a coach. And I would not be able to begin this webinar without congratulating Team Canada on their bronze medal performance in Tokyo, making history in softball. So congratulations. My name is Kristen Noonan. I'm the manager of coaching and safe sport here at Softball Canada, and I am also a provincial U16 softball coach myself. And with me is Casey Hogan, our program coordinator at Softball Canada. She's going to be helping me out with some of the audience questions today and introducing our guests. But before we get to that, I'm just going to go over a couple housekeeping items. So twice throughout the hour, I will turn it over to Casey to ask a few questions that have come in from the audience. So at any time, please type in your question or comment into the question box that you can see there. Because we are in a webinar format, you don't have access to your microphones or cameras, so please use that box for any communication. Certified coaches who provided their NCCP number upon registration will receive 1 PD point, and even if you aren't a certified coach, it will still show up in your transcript in the locker. So if you were not able to provide your NCCP number, don't worry, you can email me at knoonan@softball.ca and I can make sure to add you to the list. So I'm now going to pass it over to Casey, and she's going to introduce our 3 amazing guests to talk about coaching, being coached, and their journey to Olympic success.
Perfect. Thanks, Kristen. Very excited that I can introduce our panelists today. I'm sure many of you recognize their faces, but I will give you a bit more info on them just because they have such interesting portfolios. So I will start off with Jenna Caira, a member of the Canadian national team program for 14 years. Jenna Caira made her debut with the junior women's national team in 2007 at the WBSC Junior Women's World Championship. In 2009, she made the jump to the women's national team and has been a core piece of the senior program ever since. Caira, a co-captain of the team that booked Canada's ticket to Tokyo 2020 at the WBSC America's Olympic Qualifier, led her teammates to Canada's historic bronze medal, all while making her Olympic debut. So Jenna, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us today. I know a lot of young athletes look up to you and have ever since you started with Softball Canada, so we're really looking forward to hearing from you tonight. And next we have Melissa Vasilio. The 2021 season marks your 15th year as a member of the coaching staff for Softball Canada's national team programs. Melissa began her coaching career with Team Canada in 2006 as an assistant coach with the Canadian junior women's team that participated in the WBSC Junior World's Softball Championship while serving as head coach in 2013 and 2015. In 2009, Vasilio was named as an assistant coach with the women's national team and has since helped lead Team Canada to numerous international medals. Melissa continues to demonstrate the qualities of a true leader, both on and off the field, and has proven to be an asset to Team Canada in more ways than one. So thank you, Mel, for being here with us today. Anyone who's had the privilege to work with you knows how incredibly busy you are, which certainly speaks to your value. So we're excited to have this opportunity. And last but certainly not least, we have Mark Smith. Mark has been a head coach for the Canadian women's national team since 2009 and has led the team to a number of great results since taking over the program. At the international level, Smith's team has achieved podium results 16 times in 18 tries at major events, including gold at the 2003 and 2015 Pan American Games and 2 silvers at the 2011 and 2019. Under Smith's leadership, the women's national team achieved its first ever World Cup podium result, winning bronze medals in 2016, 2010, 2016, and 2018, and of course, most recently, our historic bronze medal at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games in Japan. Mark, I could continue to go on all night, but Kristen has me on a very tight time frame, so I will leave it at that. But it's a pleasure to have all three of you with us here this evening, and I will pass it over to Kristen to get started on the questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Casey. And yes, welcome, Mark, Melissa, and Jenna. We are very excited to have you. I can already see questions popping up, and we're already talking about Jenna's nasty change-up, which, yes, I'm sure we will talk about in a little bit. So we only have an hour, so we're going to jump right into questions. So, Mark, my first question is for you. As an Olympic coach at this level, how much of the development was on your team as a whole or as individuals versus watching, learning, and developing based on the teams that you were going to play? And did your coaching change based on the country you were playing?
Wow. Well, I guess I would start with the development piece is every bit as much individual as it is team. And one of the things that was most impressive about this group of women was in 2017, when we began the journey towards Tokyo, the level of commitment they made to their individual preparation, both in terms of their softball specific skills, but also their strength and conditioning and their mental training and nutrition. And you got to see over the period of this last 5 years, just the difference that made in their individual preparation, certainly their confidence, their physical appearance, their ability to step up and play at a very high level over a prolonged period of time. So the development was twofold. As a team, you're working on your culture pieces, you're working on your technical, tactical pieces, and certainly depending on who you're going to play against. We're fortunate in that most of the competition we faced at the Olympics, with the exception of Italy, we play on a fairly regular basis. So there are very few surprises when you get to an event against these teams. It's simply a matter of who performs better on that particular day. So we had the luxury of knowing and being able to game plan very specifically throughout our preparation, but a lot of credit has to go to the athletes who took their own individual piece to another level. And I remember on March 2nd of 2020, when we were training in Halifax and we had fitness testing. During that fitness testing day, we had 89 personal bests, which is an incredible accomplishment, considering that it meant that every athlete in multiple cases improved or performed the best they had to date on that particular day. So it was a testament to their level of commitment, and that continued through the pandemic and up until the 27th of July.
That's amazing. I know celebrating those PRs was huge, and when the whole team is hitting them, you know that you're doing something right. So now flipping off of player development, something we're doing at Softball Canada is taking a look at coach development, you know, within the NCC, but everything outside of that as well. So Mark, what are some of the competencies or qualities you possess that make you a national team coach or Olympic coach?
Well, I think a lot of it comes from experience, and I think that holds true in any walk of life, that the longer you are in a particular role and the more attention you pay to your own personal development, professional development, and how you can become better at what you do, the likelihood is that you're going to continue to improve and sort of advance through the ranks. You know, having been a player on the national team for a number of years and played at the senior level in the country for a number of years, you know, you learn the game over time through having the pleasure of competing with and against some of the best players and coaches in the world. And you take that information with you as you become a coach, and you learn the pieces of that information that fit your personality and your leadership style, and the things that you're not able to do. And then you get, as we did, to coach alongside some great people like Mel and work with some great players like Jenna, and you learn from them, and you learn about the way they perform best and how do you get the best out of the people that are around you. So, you know, I'd like to think that my leadership style and my own personal growth has sort of continued to grow over time. I think that regardless of age, that if you're open to learning and you're open to the fact that there's always a different or a new approach to take to things, that you can get better. And that's really what I observed in our team over the last 9 years, but more specifically over the last couple of years, especially when COVID kicked in March of 2020, was that people looked to do whatever they needed to do wherever they were living at the time, despite the isolation piece, to not take a step back and to continue to get better. And so as a coach, I've always considered it my job to lead by example. and to ensure that I was continuing to be the best version of myself I could be for them every day, because my expectation of them was to be the best version of themselves every day.
Yeah, I really like that. And that's so true that the players are always developing, but you as a coach are doing the same thing alongside them. So thank you. Now, Jenna, I want to get into some of your grassroots coaches as well. But before doing that, you retired or took some time off from softball in the past. So what was your reaction when Coach Smith called you up to play again, and hearing that softball was back in the Olympics?
Yeah, so I did retire after winning Pan Ams in Toronto in 2015. I was pretty burnt out, and I just knew that I needed to figure out who Jenna Caira was outside of softball. And, Coach Smith and I, as well as Coach Mel, we kept in touch. It wasn't like I said goodbye and then that was it. And Coach Smith, the man that he is, persistent. He did poke at times, like, hey, like, take some time, like, maybe you want to turn your arm over. I'm like, no, I really need to remove myself. And when it came back in 2016, the announcement was made. I thought it was so great for the sport. I was really happy for the people who were still part of the program. And Coach Smith reached out to me back in, I think it was March 2017. And he's like, hey, how you doing? You think you want to come and play in a couple of tournaments? And I was kind of at a moment in my life where I felt like I had figured things out. I felt good with where I was, who I was as well. And I'm like, man, like I haven't pitched in about a year and a half. I don't know what this is gonna feel like. I'm not working out like the way I used to. And he said it's like riding a bike. And I felt like I was in a completely different mindset, a fresh mindset, and I just felt like I was having so much fun pitching again and not making it feel like it was work. And I just had a really great new perspective on the game, and who I think it was just because of who I took care of myself. And I think that's at some point in our lives when we want to serve and serve other people, you have to look back at what you need as well. And I was really grateful that my coaching staff and my teammates gave me that space to find that, because I feel like I came back even better in terms of just being a stronger and more confident person. So yeah, when he called me, I mean, I was excited, I was nervous, but I was I felt like I was ready for a new opportunity that I knew, and it was going to look different than what I had brought for the program in the past.
Well, we're very happy that you decided to come back. So,
Oh, thank you.
well, I know you have two coaches on this call tonight, but I want to go back more to the beginning of your softball journey. So can you tell me about maybe one of your grassroots coaches and what impact they had on your development, and whether they made a difference in your journey to becoming an Olympic athlete?
Mhm. I've been very fortunate to have many coaches that have positively impacted my life, but one that comes to my mind is Bob Acton. He coached me when I was 12 years old and a couple of years after that as well. But during that time in my pitching career, my young pitching career, I threw hard, kind of wild, didn't have a good changeup, but he knew what my goals were, and he believed that I could get there if I had the right tools in place. And so he was like, Jenna, you need a changeup. And I was like, I'll figure it out. I was just this young 12-year-old. And so there was one game that we were playing. I wasn't pitching that game, and we're winning. He puts me in. I think it was like the fifth inning or something like that. And he's like, with every batter, you're going to throw at least 1 to 2 changeups. And I don't care if it's a ball. I don't care what the count is. I'm just going to I just want you to challenge yourself and throw it, because that's the only way you're going to get comfortable with it. And we ended up losing. I'm pretty sure I walked quite a lot of batters that game, and I was really frustrated. I was like, I'm very upset. I cried under a tree. I just removed myself. How could he do this to me? I'm so embarrassed. And what he did, and what I think is just such a beautiful thing that he did for me, he said, Jenna, I don't care about winning this game. I care about your development as a player, because I know what you want and where you want to go. And in order for me to help you get there, this is what you need to do. And you've got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations when you're playing, in order for you to feel at your most confident self. And now I can say I wholeheartedly will throw a 3-2 pitch, change up, bases loaded, 2 out, regardless of what the outcome is. I will still throw with conviction.
Yeah,
And I thank
that's
Bob for
amazing.
that a lot.
Amazing and powerful what he did to make you understand and see that. That's very cool. Melissa, you also were a softball athlete and had a great career in that. Did you always know that you wanted to be a coach when you were done playing, or was that something you kind of fell in love with along the way? And was there a coach that inspired you as well to become a coach?
Yeah, you know what, Kristen, it actually wasn't. It probably wasn't until towards the end of my college career, we had done some clinics and that. And to be honest, physically, how I felt during my senior year, I was like, I don't know how much longer this playing career is going to last, but I'm not ready to let it go. So I knew that I wanted to get involved with the club team that I had played for and perhaps high school sports, mainly basketball. So after I graduated, that's what I did. I helped out with a team that I played with, and I volunteered as an assistant coach with our high school basketball team. And I wouldn't say it was love at first sight. I was having a lot of fun. And definitely after that summer, I knew it was something that I wanted to do long term. Definitely for the summers, potentially all year round. And I started thinking about, what opportunities could be out there for it. But it wasn't immediate. I mean, I wasn't thinking about it as a career for sure, not professionally, until probably after that first summer where I got a little taste of it.
Yeah. Now, there's many coaches out there who are probably aspiring to be a national level coach. How did you transition from being a university coach to a coach with Softball Canada? And what advice do you have for coaches who are kind of hoping to do that same transition?
Yeah, it's as I think back, I was pretty young as I started, and shortly after I started coaching collegiately, I joined, as you'd mentioned, the junior program with Softball Canada. Um, and especially early on in the coaching career, Mark had touched on this, but was having that open mind and not just looking to your colleagues and other coaches and staff to learn from them, but really taking in what you can from the athletes. At the college level, athletes coming in, you're learning things from them, you're more so teaching them, but coming into the international level and with national team athletes, they've been through a lot. They have international experience, they have collegiate experience. So it was a matter of having a good balance of sharing my experiences as an athlete and what worked then, but even more so is looking to learn from each other and grow, especially so early on in my career, was just having that open mind and collectively, working together and learning from each other.
That's great. Thank you. All right, we're going to dig a little deeper, and Jenna, I'm going to come back to you. So, as a pitcher, mental focus and toughness is a huge part of the game. We saw this in Tokyo. How do you handle this mental aspect of the game, and especially being a pitcher? And did you have someone to work with you, whether it be a coach or a mentor, that's kind of helped you develop in this area specifically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as you said, mental toughness is obviously a really big part of being a pitcher. I mean, you have control of that ball, right? And you, in some capacity, dictate the score of the game. I definitely have mentors in my life that have taken me through, what the grind needs to look like and how do you work through that. Todd Martin is one that comes to mind, but someone that has been on our staff this past year. This past year is Lonnie Alameda, and she was our pitching coach for on our staff here, and she honestly changed my world. I was in 2019, 2020, I was kind of in this weird mindset where I was trying to be too perfect. I was trying to do more than what was expected because this is the Olympics, this is bigger, I have to be better. And it came to a point where like I would try and throw my bullpens, and if it wasn't hitting the knee on a drop ball or I didn't throw that change up perfectly, I'd be really hard on myself. And I feel like a lot of pitchers, younger pitchers especially, can relate to that. Like that perfectionist comes out of them. But Lonnie, what she did for me was that she took the time to sit with me during the pandemic when our season was unfortunately canceled. So in 2020, we had the choice to either just not do any practicing. Coach Smith gave us the option to like not have to worry about practicing for the summer months. And I asked Coach Alameda if we could do some video analysis or like help me with the mindset, because I knew that physically I was fine. I was just blocking my brain. Like there was just something in between the ears that I was losing confidence in myself with, and I needed help, and I was strong enough to admit it. And she sat down with me once a week. We Zoom called, and we looked at good and bad games. And there were some bad games I just couldn't, like, I had never watched again, like, because I just didn't want to face it. And she never talked about the mechanics for me. And I know I'm more of like an elite style like pitcher, and like yes, there comes points where you definitely need to talk mechanics, but never once did she like say certain things where I need to be here, or I need to be here. She talked more about this is the situation. That's a good pitch, Jenna. It's a ball, but like that rotated and broke really well. Look how that batter responded to that pitch. Jenna, that ball, like you jammed her, like you won. Like that's not a hit. Like, yeah, that's part of the game, but you beat her. And so she really helped remind me and like shift my brain as to what this game is, right? Like it is a game of failure, but at the same time, from a pitching perspective, if you can adjust your mindset and throw efficient, effective pitches and play that mind game and know that like before you step on the field, me as a pitcher, I'm already winning based on the stats of how this game works. That's that extra confidence that she brought back for me. And I feel that when I played at the Olympics, who, if anyone saw, like I was having the time of my life. Like Coach Smith put me in a bases loaded situation against Australia, and I was like, okay. And I just went after it, and I had a good time because Coach Alameda was just like, this is your moment. You're ready for this. Go get it. So not only did I put in the work, but she helped me, and she consistently stuck with me through this process. She challenged me, but it never felt like a threat, and it just felt like she was just such a wonderful coach to be around. And she has a wonderful reputation, and I give a whole lot of credit to Coach Smith and our coaching staff for bringing her on, because I think she was a really great asset to the success of our program.
That's amazing. Now, one thing you had said to me before that she had told you, and you can correct this and actually say the right quote, was something about bring emotion, but don't be emotional. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, like you can get mad, like that's fine. And people are like, "Oh, poker face," or don't show that you're frustrated. But like you can use that frustration to help you perform in that next pitch, but can you use that energy, and then when you step on the mound, you say, "I'm ready." Can you now channel that energy and be all in and neutral mindset to go
Yeah.
to that pitch? Right?
Yeah,
So
I
like
love
don't be pouty, but like
that.
be
Yeah.
angry, use that emotion to drive you to be better for that next pitch.
Yeah, that's
I
fantastic.
think the takeaway, Kristen, that I hear as I listen to Jenna talk, and I've known Lonnie for over 20 years and absolutely believed that she could come in and be a difference maker with our staff, and she was. But as a male coaching females, as a former male elite pitcher, I think it's important for male coaches to understand that there's a way in which we were raised to play sport from a competition standpoint, from an intensity standpoint, that is very different than how women prepare to play sport. And when we continue to try to impose the things that made us successful or the teams we've played for successful onto a group of females who are socialized very differently, oftentimes the end result is that both parties walk away frustrated. And I think that from my own experiences as a pitcher and working with Jenna over the years, I got to a place where I knew that the things that I was sharing with her and the approaches that I believed important for her to take, that wasn't enough to get her where she needed to be. She needed somebody that could meet her where she was, that understood what her frustrations were, that perhaps even gave her a place to be less guarded than with me, because as the head coach, regardless of the relationship, there's always that reality that person determines my playing time and how much of an opportunity I get. And so I think to have a female on staff, somebody as capable as Lonnie was, but a safe place for our pitchers to be able to vent, be themselves, talk about their deepest concerns, be vulnerable, I think made a huge difference. And so the message to male coaches is that A, you should have females on your staff that know the game, and B, it's not about you, the male, having to have all the answers. It's about finding the right answers and ensuring that the athletes are surrounded by the supports they need to have.
Very well said, Mark. I completely agree. Yeah. A question that came in that kind of went to this, and Mel or Mark, you can answer. This was a U16 coach said, what did you do to build the team's mental skills or mental toughness? And he asked this question because the Canadian team appeared to be very calm under pressure and able to score runs in tough situations more than any other team in the Olympics.
Go ahead, Mel, you take a go.
Oh, I can start us off for sure, Mark. I mean, when that question about pressure and kind of performing under pressure comes up, I can't help but think back to our game in the qualifier against Mexico and the learnings that we took from that game in terms of how our team performed and to that point, one of the most pressure-filled games in the past however many years. And so let's say post qualifying, and obviously we've been working towards this, but even more so after that loss and what we learned from that loss, we as a staff obviously evaluated with help from our mental performance coach and team, is we needed to put our athletes in pressure situations more often outside of the game so that they're better prepared to perform when it comes to game time. And that was, not just on the field, but in discussions and, as a collective, what do we need to do? How do we need to, or what types of things do we need to put in motion to get us ready for that biggest stage at the Olympic Games? So it was putting the team in more of those situations more frequently, rather than just showing up and being like, oh, we've never felt this amount of pressure before. So I think it was having that realization we needed more of that.
Yeah. And I think also the just being honest about the fact that on the biggest game that we'd played as a team to that point, we didn't show up. And we lost 2-1 to a team that was not a better team than we were. And we lost in a game that we knew was the difference between going to the Olympics as a higher seed versus a lower seed. And to a player and to a coach, we just didn't show up the way we needed to. And so it starts with self-evaluation and owning it. And as the head coach, that's on me. If we don't play well, regardless of what happens on the field, the first place I look is in the mirror, because ultimately I'm responsible for how this team performs. And our mental performance coach, Wade Gilbert, is world class and did a phenomenal job of mental training exercises and weekly Zoom sessions that we did throughout the pandemic, and just really, first and foremost, becoming real honest with ourselves about what happened on a collective level and what happened on an individual level, and then addressing those things or those demons that we all carry with respect to performance. And to Mel's point, finding more opportunities to put ourselves under pressure. Our training off season really became, who are we going to play today? So it was themes. Today was Japan, tomorrow was the United States, the next day was Mexico. Here's the pitcher, here's the situation, here's the execution. There is no, you get back in there if you have a bad at bat. That at bat cost us a run, that bat cost us an out. Forcing players to have to really get comfortable with the failure, but also comfortable with and excited for the challenge. And I think over the 18 months that we had to prepare, really paying attention to that mental performance piece and that team culture piece and that pulling for one another and being there to support one another, I think those were the difference makers. So to the younger coaches, I would say, one of the things we do a poor job of, I feel, and I fall into that category as well as a younger coach, is you don't recognize the value and the importance of mental preparation. And we make assumptions that when athletes reach a certain level of performance, they already have that in the toolkit. And it's amazing how many don't. And it's also amazing how many coaches don't truly understand it or know how to implement it. So it gets missed. And of course, when you miss those important things, they often show up when you least need them to show up, and you really don't have any way of being able to address it.
That's fantastic and brings such a great perspective, I think, that both of you said on applying that pressure, not just in practice or not just in the game, but in different settings and in life settings, and then really focusing on that mental prep. So thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Casey just for a few minutes now. I know we have some questions that have popped up from the audience. So Casey, I'll give it to you for 2 or 3 questions and then we'll pop back.
Sure. So we have covered a lot of ground, but I have a lot of questions coming in about team culture and the dynamic of your guys' team. So I'm going to blend a few together here, but what aspect of developing team culture is fundamental or foremost in your mind? And what are some of the activities that you guys do to build that chemistry and close bond? So I think any of you three can easily answer that one because you've all been there. So pass it over to you.
Jenna, why don't you speak to that from a player perspective?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is what we did earlier on, like even before the Olympic quad. Like I think it was 2013, Coach Smith, where we did like a personality test with the Janssen HR, right? And basically it allowed us to take a test and we understood where we were on a specific spectrum, right? And it's telling you, are you introverted? This is extroverted. Where do you fall? And there were so many different like other questions that that it provided, but you were able to see where you stood, but then where you saw the whole team. So it wasn't just about you, it was about I understand where Coach Mel lives on that spectrum. I understand where Coach Smith lives on that spectrum. Something as easy like we're going to the airport and a group of us who are more introverted are walking down together. We are rule followers. We're meant to go to the gate. And then we have one girl who's more extroverted kind of on her own and she just pivots and goes to Starbucks. We're like, where are you going? I'm like, oh wait, I get it. I know where you are, right? So having a good, and that's just a very simple, funny little example. But the point is that you need to understand the people, the personalities on your team before you can move forward, before you can dig deeper and become more vulnerable. You have to create trust and you have to be open to having those conversations. And it starts with the head coach. Like Coach Smith, he is, when we have to get, to the nitty gritty and be open and vulnerable, it starts with him. And if you don't see that from the leader, you're not going to get that from the rest of the team. You're not like, and it starts from with the captains as well, and then it trickles down. So from a team culture standpoint, first and foremost, and I'll let other people obviously chime in here, but understanding who you are, who the team is, and what their personalities represent, and then how do you get the best out of them on and off the field.
No.
That's great. Mel,
Yeah.
Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to come up, especially for the audience, with just kind of 3 simple words to kind of describe our team and what we continuously worked on, and I think towards the end where we wanted to be, and what led to our success. And evidently it was 3 words. It started with 3 C's, and it was clarity, consistency, and the collective. And so while things aren't always clear, trying to be as clear as you can in what our intentions are as a team, where we want to go, what our goals are, et cetera, just as much clarity as you can give, being consistent in what you're saying and your follow through and in your actions, and the collective, working with these elite athletes, who have a tremendous amount of experience. As I said earlier, we've got to work together and not just say do this because I say this. It's working together, putting our heads together and figuring out what works best for our team to get where we want to get to.
Yeah, I think Jenna hit the nail on the head when she talked about you have to know your teammates. It's no different than a family. Within a family, we have multiple different personalities. Somebody's like mom, somebody's like dad, somebody's like Uncle Joe. And we learn to live and coexist with those different personalities because that's who they are and that's the way they're wired. And when you multiply that by 15 or 17 athletes and then 7 or 8 coaches, understanding where you live on these spectrums becomes really important. And to Jenna's point, when you can look up and see where you are very much alike somebody and where you're very different than somebody, it then speaks to why sometimes there's clashes, why sometimes there's disagreement, because people see things from very opposing points of view. Neither is right nor wrong, it's their perspective. And so when you get a group of people that are in a place where they can acknowledge that it's okay to be different and it's okay to have a different perspective, and I need to respect where you come from and you mine, but when we step on the field to train or to play, we have to think as one and perform as one. And so our goal from, I would say 2014 forward was constantly about building culture, because we knew that in past years with this program, culture was not necessarily one of its strong suits. And so when we stepped in 2009, it was all about changing the culture of the program and creating a winning environment, but a winning environment in terms of on and off the field, in life and in softball. Not just we need to be the best softball player, we need to be the best version of a husband, a wife, an employee, a best friend. So how do we grow that? And it's, you know, it's a 12-year journey. I mean, what you saw in the field in Tokyo was the evolution of 12 years of hard work, commitment, dedication, sacrifice, disagreement, all of those things. It showed up when it needed to show up because the hay was in the barn and the heavy lifting was done. And, you know, as one of the captains, Jenna and Vic Hayward did a phenomenal job because their personalities were very different. And people would say to me, well, you know, Vic's the captain and Vic's got a very fiery personality and Jenna's has a more soothing personality. And the reason that we wanted two people who were very different is because they attracted different groups on the team. There were a group that identified with Vic, there were a group that identified with Jenna, but together we covered everybody. And so those are the kinds of things where you have to be so intentional about understanding the people you're with, understanding what makes them tick, and then you can start to formulate the plan for how you're going to get the best out of your group.
That's awesome. And that you pretty much answered my next question, which had to do with coaching philosophy. So I won't ask you that one because I know we touched on that a lot. So Kristen, maybe just looking at the time here, we'll go back to the original question.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to jump ahead on one here because I'm going to go to Jenna and I'm going to flip this a little bit. So obviously, as teammates, you spend so much time together. And I mean, we saw that camaraderie and we saw that team culture. But obviously, there's going to be moments when you're balancing different personalities, you know, as Mark was saying. And what were some of the things the team did to balance those personalities and to keep that culture going?
Mm-hmm. I think it goes back to understanding your people, right? Introverted, extroverted, the ones who are in between. And when, for us, for example, or maybe you're with a team that travels and plays 100 games in a year and you're pretty much going every week into a hotel and hanging out with your teammates and you're seeing everybody, it's understanding who they are and being okay that there are certain people that resonate with certain people. And there are times where when it's not about team bonding, it's okay to go hang out with those people because those are your people, if you understand what that means, right? But at the same time, there are moments where you need that time with, you know, on your own or even solo, but then there also requires that team bonding time, right? And that's the barbecues, the pool hangs, you know, fun little activities, playing cards, whatever you want it, right? But something else that I think we did a really good job with is being able to share how we're feeling in like really tough moments when it's like, oh my God, like we are in the pit right now. Like we haven't been home for over 90 days. Like this is like getting a lot. I'm missing home. And one of my teammates was like, you know, I miss the mountains. Like I don't feel at peace. Like I need greenery. I don't have that. I'm in Carbondale, Illinois, which is wonderful, but very different. And so like when I heard that, like my heart broke for my teammate who shared this, and I was very grateful that she did because, you know, many of us on our team, I think, which shows like so much, it's so beautiful on our team where like we truly care about one another and not only as just as athletes, but as people. So one of my teammates, Morgan, and I decided to go to Target and we tried to find like moss, fake branches, and we got a projector and we made our little apartment into an outdoor woodsy area and we made a tent and we took the projector and we just put out like mountains. We turned off the lights. We bought a candle that smelled like trees so that it made her feel like home. So, you know, you have to get creative when things become stale. It was the most corniest cliche thing, but like it made her feel better. It made her feel like we were listening and we truly cared about her as a person. So don't always have to do like the bonding where okay, we got to sit down, we got to talk about this. Oh, okay, time for that pool party that we do every year. What's special where you're learning about each other and you're hearing them, you're listening to them and giving them what they need in those moments so that they can continue to thrive when we need them to the next day. So a long-winded answer.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
a great story and shows how great teammates are and what a difference you can make in somebody's life, especially when you're traveling and you're away from the regular things in life. So that's fantastic.
yeah. I think it's just also like making sure you keep a pulse on the team, right? Like there are certain leaders, it could be the coaches, but like, where are we at? Like, do we need a break from each other? Do we need some team chemistry, some time together? Where are we, and what do we think is the best route to take right now? So don't just make assumptions, really try and get to know the people around you, have those tougher conversations, and see where you're at and see what you need from each other.
Very good. So speaking of tougher conversations, Mel, I'm going to ask you this one. So you were working with older athletes who were all adults themselves. How do you handle discipline? And was it a team decision to pause social media during the Olympics, or was that a coaching decision? And Mark, you can chime in too. And do you see something like this benefiting younger teams, say if they're going to Canadian championships or something like that?
I think we're all laughing because I get the question about the disciplinarian. Is that why you guys are laughing? Yeah, to that point, Kristen, I mean, I thank this team for putting, challenging me and challenging each other to go through those, difficult conversations, and that was ever evolving. But I think with the older athletes, very different from, the 14-year, 16U team. I think about Mark to 2009, it was hard, no cell phone, the rules that we implemented, lots and lots and lots of rules to start off. And I think the key to it was, as years went on, as the athletes got older, and our culture started to develop and evolve, we had to review those rules that we had implemented and make sure it still applies to our team, the athletes who are on this team, and what really makes sense, because they're adults. They need to be treated as adults, and is this really necessary? Is this rule really necessary to continue to do what we need to do? I'm gonna throw this cell phone, and Jenna, you probably remember, or if you were there, when we were in a restaurant as a team, another team walked in and they were in line and they had their faces glued to their
Chipotle.
phones. Just, Chipotle, yes, we won't say what team it was, but anyways, it was crystal clear. They wanted nothing to do with each other. And our team, I think at that moment, kind of realized, like, hey, I guess it makes sense for us not to have. This is why Coach Smith is implementing this rule, so that we are focused on each other, getting to know each other, learning more of each other, rather than being in our little bubble and on our phones. And as years went by, we didn't need to implement rules like that. Our girls knew what was important. They knew what the goal was, and they could make their own decisions as to whether it was the right time to be on the phone or not. And that I could say that about a lot of the rules that were made with the team. So it's give them space to do what they need to do, and if it was something that we identified as something that didn't maybe belong with how we wanted to behave as a team, then it was addressed. But it wasn't about making rules just to make rules because we had to. It had to make sense, and there had to be a reason for it.
That's great.
I think to Mel's point too, as teams mature, it's almost like raising children from the perspective of there's lots of rules when your kids are young, and the older they get and the more they prove that they can be given responsibility, then the less you impose rules on them. And I think as a team, it's the same. You want to start off ensuring that there's a standard that everybody's expected to meet. And as the athletes start to demonstrate through their own behaviors and their own decision-making processes that they can respect and honor the standard, then you can start to relax in terms of what expectations are. And in terms of the Olympics, our focus was to come home with a gold medal. And we talked about that openly as a team. We weren't going to get on the podium. We were going to get on the middle podium. And it was difficult to lose to the United States and Japan, knowing that we were as good as they were. We felt and just couldn't not to run into to win those ball games. But the reality was, to be the best we could be for that 7 or 8 days meant that we had to be our own little bubble. We needed to be all in with one another. There's enough other distractions that we didn't need to encourage distractions. And so as a group, the team decided before we left Angel City that signing off on their social media and making sure that the public understood that it was simply a case of us looking after us was important. And I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. And I think it absolutely impacted our ability to stay in the moment and be prepared as we needed to in competition.
That's great. I got one more question for you, Mark, and then we're going to pass it back to a couple audience questions. You helped in the creation of our athlete development matrix, our gold medal profile. So any advice for coaches who are using resources like those? And do you feel that having those resources maybe at the beginning of your coaching career would have made a difference?
Well, I think anytime you have information that is age and stage of development specific, it can only help your ability to provide the athletes with what they need. And when we develop the gold medal profile, when we develop the long-term player development model, when we develop the winning style of play that we use with the senior team, all of these things were done with the intention of being able to measure improvement in performance. Athletes want to know how they're doing. You know, kids go to school every day. At the end of the term, they get a report card, and the report card says, here's how you're doing in these subjects, and you learn where you need to be better and where you're doing a good job. It's no different in terms of athlete performance. If we want players to work hard, especially away from the team, put in time, work on their pitching, work on their hitting, work on their fielding, there needs to be a point in time when we can measure progress. So what these tools do is they give the coach a ready-made opportunity to be able to evaluate an athlete's ability. So for example, if at the start of a season, if we bring a group of kids together in March in the gym and we use the gold medal profile to measure where kids are in terms of their physical skills at that point in time, and then 2 months into the season, we measure them again, in most instances, you're going to see improvement. Well, that's motivational to the athlete. That means that he or she feel good about themselves. I'm working hard, I'm getting better. It also lets the coach know that whatever practice plans and types of drills that they're implementing are working and having the desired effect. So to me, if we're coaching for performance in terms of wanting to help kids get better, which is the business we're in as coaches, then we need to have some type of measurement that allows us to know how they're doing, but most importantly, are we doing the right things to move them along that continuum? So I'm a huge advocate for using those kinds of resources because it gives us a chance to constantly measure how we're doing and whether we're doing the right things for the kids we coach.
That's great. And if you don't have a copy of the athlete development matrix or the gold medal profile, they are available on the Softball Canada website. So there you go. Casey, I'm going to pass it over to you. We've got time for 1 or 2 questions before we do some wrap-up questions. I know there's lots there. We won't get through them all, but you can pick 1 or 2 and then we'll keep going.
Sure. Yeah, Mark, you're making my job very easy because you're answering all these questions as they come in. So I know there's a couple about, you know, because Canada is such a wide variety in terms of seasons and how long each province has, you know, some have longer winters and a lot of their training has shifted indoors. So I think those resources that you just talked about and giving athletes those tools really do help, you know, keeping athletes on track. So with that said, I'll go on to one more, and we've touched a bit on it before, but how much of your coaching role extends beyond the diamond? So example, you know, athletes messaging you about nutrition, their mental health, their training, or life issues in general, and how do you set guidelines for that?
Well, I think different than the club level, you know, we're fortunate enough to have experts in those areas. We had the nutritionist Angela Dufour, who was also the lead nutritionist for the Canadian Olympic Committee. We had Scott Wilgris as our strength coach, who also works with Ellie Black and Hockey Canada and some of the other high performing athletes and teams in the country and in the world. So, so we were able to put the right people in the right places to make sure the athletes had what they need. One of the things that I learned very early on as a head coach is that I don't have to have all the answers. I need to find the answers that I don't have. And so by surrounding myself with highly capable people who are experts in their own right in their own areas, then as long as I understand, my job is to set the path and to set the direction and the vision along with the rest of the staff for where we want to go. And then quite honestly, it's to hand things off to people who are experts in those fields and let them take it. Wade Gilbert did a phenomenal job, not only working with our athletes, but also keeping our coaching staff front of mind, our own performances as coaches. Angela was great with nutrition, making sure that people had the right caloric intake, and especially when we got to countries where we weren't as familiar with the food, we maybe, you know, were losing weight because of heat and those sorts of things, to make sure that we were staying hydrated and we needed what we needed to have. You know, Lonnie, of course, on the technical side with the pitchers, Chris Jones with the infielders. You know, at the end of the day, it's really about ensuring that the kids have what they need. At a club level, to me, it's about at the very start of your year, identifying what are those key areas that you know you're going to need resources in, and then almost preemptively going out and planning ahead. So for example, if nutrition is something that as a staff we value, then prior to the start of the season, I would already have a nutritional plan in place to give to the athletes around nutrition, where we're going to eat at tournaments, moms and dads, what kind of food you can bring, and not only why we're eating those kinds of foods, how it fuels the body for preparation over tournament weekends. Mental performance, I would already have in place what's the strategies we're going to use, what are the, based on the age and stage of development, what are they capable of in terms of mental performance? So how do I implement those things? So for me, for example, my preparation for the next season started now. You know, our season finished in August. I picked the month of September off, and around the 1st of October, it became scheduling and planning and training plans and coming together with people to talk about what our needs would be and when we would need to implement these things. I think at the club level, it's really no different. It's just a little less cumbersome, but it's about planning forward and knowing what it is you know your athletes' needs should be at that level. And if you aren't certain, then by all means, reach out to more experienced people to ask. But I think if you do these things in terms of being ahead of the game and planning these things ahead, you're not going to be as inundated with the emails and phone calls from parents and kids because you've already handled that on the front end.
That's great, thank you. And to come full circle, I'll end on this one. So in the medal ceremony, obviously it was noticed that players started putting the medals around each other's necks, something that not all the medaling teams did. So was that something that was planned, or did it just happen in the moment? Jenna, you might be able to elaborate a little bit more on that one.
I mean, we're in the back end, like while we're waiting for the game. Oh, my camera is blurry. I don't know why that's happening. Sorry about that. While the gold game was happening, we were in the back trying to determine how we were going to step on the podium. We were like practicing, like trying to make it feel big and awesome. And I honestly don't like. It was like kind of like broken telephone. Like Coach Mel, you were there too. Like, did we talk about doing it? Because I was near the end.
We did. It was our chef de mission for the Canadian Olympic Committee, Marnie McBean. I think she had mentioned something about Canadian athletes placing medals on each other, and it was shown on ceremony. So to Jenna's point, in the back end during the gold medal game, or the girls wanted to do this. They wanted to put the medals around each other, but it was like, how are we going to do this? We can't botch it. Get on the podium, botch it. So we actually had everybody stand up and say, okay, let's do a run through this and let's make sure we get it right. So
it was all over the place in the moment, but I mean, I think the placing of the medals and then hugging, like the embrace, I think was a nice touch in the sense that it really was about like that is Team Canada softball. Like we truly love each other. Like like there is banter here and there, but like at the end of the day, like we were honestly, we were sisters and we cared about each other, their performance as human beings, and we were just so proud of one another, and the embrace was just so genuine and real. And whether people meant to do it, we just embraced it and we didn't care.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think it certainly speaks to the sportsmanship that you guys have talked about throughout the evening. So Kristen, I will leave it to you to wrap things up.
All right, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I have one final question for each of you. But before we get to that, this is just a quick one. For each of you, I want, if you could give one book to a coach or player to read, what would it be? Jenna, you go first.
It Takes What It Takes by Trevor Moawad. It's about the mental side. Works with athletes and then also other professions, but just the mental side of how to approach things. It's that you don't have to be positive because things aren't always so positive. Like it's gonna be really hard and you can't find anything good. You can't be negative because that's literally takes you nowhere. It's very much about like neutral thinking. And so it takes you through some examples, and I think it's a really easy read and it's really great. And that book actually got passed around quite a lot within our team.
Very cool. So it takes what it takes, just so we can have our coaches writing it down. Good. Mel, what about you?
So many to choose from. Came up with this one for coaches. So it's Practice Perfect, and it's not about practicing to be perfect, but if you guys can see the font, it's rules for getting better at getting better. So lots of nuggets in there for practice planning and running your practice. So Practice Perfect.
Thank you. And Mark?
Legacy by James Kerr. It speaks to, the theme is the New Zealand All Blacks, and of course they're considered to be the most successful sport franchise in the world. And it speaks to how they build their team, how they build their culture. They speaks to how their leadership full, how their team captains and their leaders lead their team. And it's a blueprint that I've drawn from and really implemented with our team probably 6 years ago. And what I think, again, we saw this year and we saw in the last couple of years was things go full circle, and the types of behaviors that we talked about and acknowledged as needing to be core to who we were, you saw in full display.
Wow. Well, 3 great books. And Mark, you're definitely leaving a legacy yourself here. So last questions I'm going to go through just quickly. Jenna, is there more softball in your future, and what are your plans now? And will we ever see you in a coaching position one day?
I think softball will always be part of my life in some capacity. I think right now, I'll never say never, because heck, I came back after in 2015. Who knows? And there's been a couple women on our team that have paved the way to say, like, you can have some kids and you can come back and kick butt. So I never say never. But in the meantime, I think I'm putting the glove away for a bit, but I really want to put a coaching hat on in terms of providing pitching clinics and lessons for the next generation, and share what I have learned. Like, I feel like I've learned so much, especially within these last 4 years, and I'm 32 years old, right? And so if I can give to these 10 to 17-year-olds or whoever I have the privilege of working with, then that really fills my bucket. So in the coaching world, I think more just the lessons right now.
That's okay. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And now, Melissa, you're still obviously coaching at Softball Canada. So what competitions are you currently gearing up for, or what's happening in your role right now?
Yeah, we've got the U18 World Cup scheduled for early December in Peru. So middle of August, we had our final camp for the junior national team, and it's great to see standing there at the field looking at these athletes, thinking that these are our future potential Olympians standing right there. So U18 World Cup in December.
Very cool. And lastly, Mark, after a long and successful coaching career and recently announcing your retirement, what is next for you?
I like to be busy, Kristen, so I'll end up replacing one busy habit with another. But since returning to my position with Sport Nova Scotia as the director of sport, there's plenty there on the amateur sports scene in Nova Scotia to keep me busy. We're doing some really neat work in the EDI, through the EDI lens, which I'm excited about. But I've also just landed a couple of contracts to do some leadership and coach consulting, and also do some motivational speaking. So those are going to be the things I think over the next year that I'm going to dig into a little bit and have some fun with, and hopefully share some of the lessons learned and great experiences I've had a chance to be a part of through this program, and see where that takes me.
That's great. I know this won't be the last we hear from you. And I do wish you all the best with that. And thank you for all you've done in softball over the last 30 plus years. So before I close, one last thing, Jenna, do you have your medal and do we get to see it?
I did bring it. I have it here. It's not in a sock the way I brought it home, but yeah, here it is.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Very nice.
Very nice. And what was really cool about it is that they custom it. Sorry, is this right? Yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah.
It says women's softball. So every medal based on the sport, the athlete that you are, will be, customized to what you play, which is really unique.
That is fantastic. Well, congratulations to all 3 of you. And as we come to a close, I just want to thank you, Jenna, you, Mel, and you, Mark, for joining us this evening. Congratulations again on that bronze medal and setting a new bar for softball in Canada. Thank you, Casey, for helping me out as well. And to all of our softball coaches out there, thank you for doing what you do. And please continue to give back, keeping softball safe and fun for everyone to enjoy. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening and happy National Coaches Week.